弟兄姊妹平安，弟兄姐妹大家好。Good evening, brothers and sisters。今天晚上咧，我哋就開始我哋2019加拿大華人教會普查 The General Survey of the Chinese Churches in Canada 2019。我哋今天晚上好感謝主，俾我哋有呢個機會咧，加拿大華福同埋加拿大華人神學院領導學研究中心，我哋喺2019年咧已經開始去籌備呢一個嘅項目咧，嚟到係去將全加拿大嘅華人教會有個景觀嘅普查。咁我哋感謝主呢個團隊咧已經完成晒所有嘅研究分析同埋數據嘅整理。今天晚上感謝神俾我哋呢次嘅機會咧，可以同大家同眾教會眾弟兄姊妹一齊嚟到去分享。咁我哋感謝主，我哋嘅團隊嘅負責嘅帶領咧，就係 Dr. Enoch Wong 黃建安博士。咁團隊就有兩位好重要嘅研究同工係Dr. Tommy Tsui 徐權能博士，同埋 Dr. Wes Wong 黃長順博士。咁佢都花咗好多時間嚟到去分析呢啲嘅數據。今天晚上咧就同大家嚟到去分享。大家留意我哋呢一次喺 Zoom 嘅發佈會咧，因為係有呢個語言上邊嘅需要咧，係需要有英文啦，需要有呢個國語同埋粵語嘅。咁大部分時間我會用粵語啦，但係我哋嘅講員咧，3位講員陣間都會有分享嘅。佢哋會用3種唔同嘅語言，佢哋會用英文啦，佢哋會用國語啦，同埋會用粵語。咁我哋希望今天晚上亦都有一個好嘅討論。所以我哋陣間當我哋幾位嘅講員咧，大概1個小時左右嘅將所有嘅資料同大家嚟到去分析，嚟到去陳述。咁大家有問題咧，可以預先咧嚟到去寫定又好到時喺 Q&A 裏面咧，大家可以嚟到去寫出嚟。咁我哋到時咧，我哋嘅幾位嘅講員就會按照你嘅問題咧，同埋睇下我哋嘅時間有幾多啦，嚟到一同嚟到去做呢個嘅回應㗎。所以喺呢個開始之先咧，我哋一齊有個祈禱，我哋將今天晚上嘅時間交俾我哋嘅神。親愛嘅天父上帝，我哋喺你嘅面前獻上我哋嘅感恩。你使用我哋呢一個研究嘅團隊喺加拿大華福同埋加拿大華人神學院一同嚟到合作。我哋見到我哋所做嘅一切有你自己恩手拖帶引領。透過1年嘅時間，我哋能夠將數據搜集分析，同埋加以嚟到去陳述。今天晚上呢個嘅發佈會，願意係神你自己得榮耀嘅日子。以眾弟兄姊妹、眾教會領袖當中所睇到嘅、所分析嘅，能夠同心嚟到去策動我哋加國華人教會未來一個更好嘅發展嘅路向。你保守亦都使用我哋當中每一個嘅環節。我哋同樣將我哋翻譯嘅過程交俾你，願意你親自嚟到去使用。我哋就恭敬嘅嚟到去將今天晚上嘅時間從頭到尾嚟到去交託。願你與我哋同在，保守帶領我哋。我哋嘅祈禱感恩，奉耶穌基督聖名而求。
阿們。
好，我哋就唔再等咁多時間啦，就將時間直接就交俾我哋3位嘅講員。
好多謝譚牧師，好客氣。亦都係多謝譚牧師代表加拿大華福同我哋加拿大華神學院領導學研究中心有呢個美好嘅合作。咁咧，今日我哋有1個小時嘅時間同大家嚟到去分享我哋呢一個嘅普查嘅結果。我哋嘅語言咧，我開始嘅時候會用廣東話，跟住咧我哋其中一個嘅隊員徐權能牧師博士咧，佢會用國語，然後Wes Wong 博士同埋我喺最後嗰一半咧，我哋會用英文嘅嚇。咁麻煩Wes，唔該你咧係將嗰個嘅 PowerPoint 打出嚟。Wes，麻煩你將係啦，好嘢 ，thank you。咁就我諗我簡單介紹一下我哋呢幾位啦。我咧就係喺加拿大華神學院唔單止係教學，亦都係負責呢個嘅領導學研究中心。咁徐牧師咧，徐權能牧師咧係海明頓主恩國語宣道會嘅主任牧師，而黃長信博士咧 係 Mississauga 密實西加華人宣道會一個平信徒嘅領袖。咁今日我哋好簡單同大家睇下，我哋要一個嘅 agenda， 睇下我哋分享嘅乜嘢。我哋會解釋我哋點解會做呢個嘅研究，我哋點樣嘅嚟到去進行呢個研究，我哋得到咩嘅結果，同埋有咩學習。然後咧，我哋可以討論一下我哋下一步係點樣咧。然後最後咧，我哋有一個嘅問答嘅一個環節喺中間。咁同大家分享一下咧，就係我哋而家呢個研究嘅報告咧，就係下一個 slide 啦。你睇到咧就係呢個咁樣嘅圖畫。本來咧我哋係用咗好多時間係準備今天晚上咧將呢個報告咧嚟到去同大家分享，但係可惜嘅咧就係我哋仲係遇見少少嘅問題，需要大概1至2個禮拜時間，起碼1個禮拜就能夠處理咗佢。我一陣間會詳細嚟到去將入邊嘅目錄同大家嚟到分享一下。好啦，咁跟住落嚟咧就係嗱，呢個就係我哋嗰個嘅相啦。我成日都講笑，喺你哋嘅熒幕右手邊戴眼鏡有鬍鬚嗰位就係 Wes 啦。咁Wes 咧，我哋講笑就係我即係第時年紀大嘅時候就係佢咁嘅樣。我以前年紀細嘅時候咧就好似阿 Tommy 咁樣。好啦，咁跟住落嚟咧，我首先未開始之前要多謝每一位參加呢一個嘅研究呢個調查嘅每一個教會、每一個傳道人、每一個嘅平信徒嘅領袖。冇咗佢哋嘅參與咧，我哋就冇法子有呢個數據咧嚟到去同大家進行研究同埋有呢個嘅結果。唔單止咁，亦都多謝今晚咧係你哋出席參加。我知道有啲嘅弟兄姊妹係喺美國嚟到去過嚟嘅，咁就唔知道咧係今日美國係大選啦，但係你哋都係咁客氣嚟到去參加，好多謝你。Just want to give a shout out to those who are joining us tonight from the States. I know tonight is an important night, not only for United States, for the whole world. We are all watching with our prayer and with our interest, and we pray that the Lord will continue to guide the election night. But nonetheless, we thank you, give you a shout out to join us tonight. 咁跟住落嚟咧，我哋會開始嚟到俾大家嚟到睇一睇呢個報告嘅一個好簡單嘅一個嘅輪廓，我哋叫做咧係即係50,000 view、50,000 feet view 一個 slide 嚟到去睇一睇啊。首先我哋睇睇呢個研究嘅目的係乜嘢？By the way， 我哋今日嘅成個嘅 PowerPoint 嘅內容咧，全部都係用英文嘅，所以咧係方便大家嚟到睇英文嘅可以咧知道一下。咁我哋今日基本上嚟講咧，係研究嘅目的就係咧，係希望喺加拿大嘅華人教會中間去建立一個咧係一個清楚嘅輪廓。我哋係攞到英文講叫做攞個 baseline。究竟華人教會係一個乜嘢嘅 entity， 咩個個體？當你入去一個華人教會嘅時候，你會見到啲乜嘢？你會見到點樣嘅牧師？你會聽到咩嘅語言？有咩嘢嘅事工？佢哋點樣使錢？有冇植堂等等等等？呢啲都係喺我哋研究中間咧嚟到去有所交代嘅。咁去理解華人教會呢啲嘅普查咧，據我哋所知道咧，曾經做過嘅咧就係2015年喺 Regina 大學 Henry Chow 教授曾經做過類似咁樣，不過佢嗰個嘅嗰個 breadth， 佢個闊度冇我哋咁大。另外喺2003年華福都曾經做過一啲簡單嘅普查，但係佢個 breadth 亦都冇我哋咁大。咁我哋做呢個嘅研究報告開始嘅時候，正如剛才譚牧師講過，我哋係2019年1月份開始，直至到2020年3月，整整用咗15個月嘅時間嚟到去收集。咁你會問點解咁耐嘅時間啊？咁一方面就係我哋嗰個反應似乎唔係太好。咁其中一個我哋可以睇到咧，就係似乎我哋華人教會對調查同埋對做研究呢個咁樣嘅理解咧，唔係話佢唔認同，只不過係可能好新嘅接觸，係全面性嘅理解咧，參與係比較差一啲。無論如何，我哋嘅對象咧係針對住喺加拿大嘅移民教會，喺加拿大嘅移民教會。我哋講到移民教會咧，唔係講到喺一個西人教會裏頭 有個中文堂，而係講緊有佢自己獨立嘅能力，有獨立嘅領導喺中間。換句説話講，我哋會揾嗰啲教會咧，係特別係佢有佢自己嘅嘅堂委會，有長執會，有佢嘅長老會等等等等。咁咧就唔單止咁樣啦，我哋係針對嘅地方最主要就係去理解加拿大華人教會佢哋嘅事工，我哋嘅團隊同工嘅團隊佢哋面對嘅問題係乜嘢？咁我哋咧其實去開始發呢個嘅將呢個問卷發出嚟嘅時候咧，我哋係無論係透過郵件真係實際嘅 mail 或者係電郵咧，我哋係曾經係發出咗483嘅邀請信，而收到嘅係115。但係嚴格嚟講咧，喺呢115嘅收到嗰個嘅回應中間咧，係只係106個咧係合格，因為其中咧有一啲咧係佢係來自一啲嘅教會，佢唔係獨立教會，或者咧佢係重複嘅嚟到去參與。同樣嘅喺呢483個電郵地址嘅呢個咁樣嘅directory， 喺我哋用呢個英文講咧，我哋即係發覺到咧係得394間咧係正正式式咧係獨立嘅華人移民教會。所以咧我哋從一個即係呢個嘅 response rate 呢個反應嚟講咧，就係106啊 out of 394。咁我哋寫呢個 report 咧，我哋係用英文寫嘅，但我哋感謝主。我哋係翻譯咗做中文，係 Alex 張弟兄，亦都係我哋嘉誠嘅同學，嚟到去將佢翻譯成為中文。咁咧，我哋出嘅時候咧，希望大家留意，我哋會係透過電郵同大家有接觸，嚟到咧係將呢個嘅通知話俾大家，你可以咧去華福嘅網址嗰度咧嚟到去下載呢個咁樣嘅報告。咁呢個報告咧其實好簡單嚟到去分享。對唔住，我哋呢個嘅有個 table 係 table of contents， 有個 S 喺中間。我哋分六章嚟到同大家有所交代。開始嘅時候就係簡單嘅交代我哋呢個嘅研究報告嗰個簡介，我哋個輪廓係乜嘢。咁跟住咧，我哋就講到即係華人教會嗰個基本嘅輪廓係乜嘢啊。跟住咧，我哋講到咧傳道人 ministers。咁唔單止講到傳道人咧，我哋講到呢個 ministry 佢哋嘅事工。然後我哋跟住講到咧佢哋面對緊咩問題。然後去到最後嗰一章 chapter 6咧。我哋就講到個總結，咁跟住仲有啲附錄咧，係交代我哋成個嘅問卷同埋我哋研究個方法等等等等。咁寫呢個嘅成個嘅報告咧，就係我同埋徐牧師、徐博士同埋阿黃博士一齊寫嘅。我負責嘅地方咧，就係我係寫第1章、第5章同埋第6章。Wes Wong 博士咧就負責第2章同第4章，而中間第3章咧就係徐牧師嚟到負責啦。咁咧喺我哋研究嘅過程中間咧，我哋亦都係預見一啲所謂叫做限制，因為當我哋嚟到去完成呢個嘅研究嘅時候，剛才我講到咧係3月啊，所以咧你發現到咧，我哋啱啱3月完結嘅時候咧，呢個嘅新冠型肺炎呢個 pandemic 咧都未係完全嘅嚟到去咧係影響緊我哋嘅教會。咁當然我哋有啲嘅所謂叫做端倪，知道一下嘅情況係點樣。但係無論如何咧，喺呢個研究報告中間咧，我哋係處理唔到究竟呢個 pandemic 呢個新冠肺炎影響緊教會最重要嘅問題係乜嘢？例如一啲 social distancing 啦，例如上網崇拜啦，例如點樣影響事工，甚至影響我哋教會嘅奉獻啦，等等等等。所以呢啲咧，我哋係完全都冇機會嚟到掌握嘅。另外一個嘅限制咧，就因為我哋嘅反應上高嚟講咧，就唔係好完全，所以咧我哋唔能夠咧做一個所謂叫做因果嘅推論，只能夠做一個嘅 correlation 嘅推論。correlation 之後咧，我哋係相關性。我哋按住呢個研究106個嘅研究中間咧，嚟到去理解究竟呢106個嘅教會面對咩問題，而伸延到去理解。全個加拿大，起碼我哋手頭上攞到嘅電郵地址等等，係394個嘅教會嗰個表達情況。咁跟住落嚟咧，我想將呢個時間交俾阿徐權能牧師博士咧，佢會同我哋去處理理解究竟教會嘅牧者同工佢哋嘅境況係乜嘢。現在我們把這個時間交給徐牧師、徐博士。 他现在跟我们讲到，我们在这个调查当中理解我们华人教会同工的情况是怎么样。我就把这个时间交给徐牧师。
好，谢谢一诺，也非常荣幸，很高兴今天晚上能够在这里与大家一起来分享这个我们调查的一些的结果。我在这里将会讲一下关于教牧同工、传道人这一些的数据。刚才一诺也已经说了，我们收到106家教会里面的这些的回应，所以我们跟着下来所要分析的所有的这些数据呢，都是根据这个106个教会的那个回应。在当中在这106位106个教会里面呢，有4家教会呢就告诉我们，他们是一个传道人都没有的，在那个教会里面，所以有4家教会是没有传道人的。然后呢分别有1位或者2位或者3位的传道人这些的教会加起来就大概就总共是60个教会然后其他的就是会有更多的教会更多的这些的传道人在里面的，有4个、5个、6个，然后最多的一家是有32个传道人在里面。那我们看到这个的数据呢，告诉我们其实大部分的教会都是相对来说是没有太多的这些传道人在同一个教会里面的，很多都是1个、2个、3个这个样子少数是1个传道人都没有。那我们都知道这个Wes 先回去Can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. 我们知道这个在华人教会里面通常除了这个中文都很多时候还会有英语堂中文有时候也会有国语跟粤语很普遍的一个现象就是一个教会里面有3个语言3个堂会在同一个教会里面所以如果一个教会里面只有1个传道人或者2个传道人其实这个是对传道人来说是蛮吃力的一个事情，他们需要去照顾不同的语言的这个群组还没有算年老的、年轻的这一些不同的分龄的牧养所以目前的情况是这个样子。好，下一个 slide 呢，我们也看到一个教会里面关于这个有没有主任牧师这一个的一些的数据在这里在一个报告里面我们会用 lead pastor 或者 senior pastor 这2个字我们通常都是没有怎么分中文我们都是翻译成为主任牧师在这一个106家教会里面，我们看到有70个教会是有这个主任牧师的，然后其他的36个就是没有这个的主任牧师，所以从这一些的数据里面我们看到大概超过1半的是有这个主任牧师。然后呢我们也看到这现在大家看到的这个图表或者这个 table 分了不同的这个宗派里面给我们的一些数据然后我们呢也看到好像在某一些的宗派里面呢，好像比较多的教会是没有主任牧师的你看到这个浸信会总共这里我们有23家教会给我们有回应，然后当中有1半11个是没有主任牧师，然后播道会更加好像情况更加严重一点了总共有13家有给我们回应，但是其中有11家是没有主任牧师的宣道会里面也是有蛮多是还没有主任牧师的所以我们看到的情况是这个样子。那当然我们也知道这个在华人教会刚才我说了有这个粤语国语跟英文很多时候这个要兼顾3个语言的这一些的 牧养实在是不容易的。一般的教会也很多时候对这个主任牧师是有一些要求的，希望他精通3个语言最好是3个语言都能够用3个语言来讲道，然后要明白3个这个群体的这个文化。然后我们也知道这个其实是一个很难的一个事情所以这个找到适合的这个主任牧师，这个是不是很容易的？好，我们下一个讲到这个有一些教会是没有主任牧师啦，然后有一些是有主任牧师啦，然后我们也谈一谈这个接班的这一个的事情怎么传承这一个的现象根据这一些数据里面，我们看到呢刚才我们说到有70家教会说是目前是有主任牧师的，而当中呢，在这70家里面有46家已经是有了一些的计划，正在进行中是来说要继任的一些的计划，就是可能他们已经找到有一些人正在栽培，或者已经有想法了这个现在主任牧师将要退休的时候，将要有什么的人会接班 ，OK， 然后当中更加有13个已经找到人了，准备好了任何时候这位主任牧师退休的时候或者离开的时候，就会有另外一个人是上来接班的。所以我们看到这些数据呢，我们看到最少从这106个教会给我们回应的里面的话相当高的一些的这个比例是对这个接班接任这个事情是有计划的，是有一个积极的一些计划，所以这个是很健康的一个现象。好，最后我的这个环节的最后就是跟大家讲一讲关于这个分布在这106家里面的教会里面的这些的教牧同工在这106家教会里面加起来总共有440位传道人同工当中呢这里我们也问了一些关于他们的学历我们看到有差不多73% 的教牧同工，他们是有硕士或者硕士的，最少有硕士的这个的教育水平的。然后呢，更加大概有20% 有这个博士的这个训练我们这里也看到，如果是有博士的话，他就也是有那个学士或者硕士了，所以这个加起来不会是 100% 的，会超过那个的。那我们也相信，在现在这个情况，这个社会越来越困难，越来越复杂，很多不同的文化然后在北美华人怎么在这里去生活怎么分析这些不同的想法这个我们都需要一些的牧者可能在神学方面，可能不同的方面有更多的这一些的教育或者训练，好让他们更能够受到装备来引导弟兄姊妹怎么去在这个复杂的这个环境里面把神的这个生命把信仰把它活出来。所以不少的教会，不少的信徒都可能对传道人的这个教育水平可能都会有
Looks like Tommy has been frozen in time, so he'll never get old again.
告诉帮助我讲这个关于ministry 的一个事情Wes.
Hey, 谢谢你. Hey, thank you, Tommy. So as Enoch mentioned earlier, we wrapped up our collection of the survey responses in March. On the 12th, 2020, BC, before COVID-19. However, due to the impact of the pandemic, we do expect that our churches to pivot and to adapt to the new normal. So during this time, the church ministries extended beyond the four walls of the church buildings. Many churches added or expanded their online presence. They leveraged technology to support ministries such as worship service, small group and fellowship gatherings, outreach such as Alpha and discipleship, and to reach a broader base unconstrained by geographical locale and time zone. I'd expect that the impact of the pandemic could affect the responses in the areas of church attendance, budgets, staffing, ministries, and new issues and challenges to confront. So if we undertake a follow-up survey now, we may get some interesting and insightful feedback with a different trajectory. Be that as it may, we're not going to presume the future. Tonight, we are going to share with you what we have found in the past year or so. And based on the survey questionnaire, we collected a broad set of data elements to help us learn about the ministries in our Chinese churches across our home and native land. For example, we collected data on the location of the church respondents. And as you can see, we received almost a half of our responses from Ontario-based churches, followed by BC and Alberta. We also determined the age of each church based on when it was established. And other elements include the church attendance, the number of baptisms and membership transfers in 2018. We also found about the respondents' worship services and other ministries, such as mission and church planting. And in our analysis, we sliced and diced the data and also looked at different views by combining various data elements. For example, we looked at the data from the dimensions of the number of baptisms and the number of membership transfers by the age of the church and by the size of the church. Other dimensions include the worship services, such as Cantonese, Mandarin, English, youth, and children, and specific ministries such as mission, evangelism, discipleship, and church planting. We also slice and dice the data by budgets, such as general fund, building fund, and mission fund. And here's an example of the budget data by their sizes and funds. Can you see this? Well, let's zoom in and take a closer look. The green columns enumerate the general fund budget ranges for the churches. For example, 3 churches had general fund budgets over $2 million. The yellow columns count the building fund budgets. So 80 churches reported they have building funds under $50,000. And the red columns show the number of churches with mission funds. For example, 36 churches had mission funds between $50K and $500,000. Now, as Enoch indicated earlier, we're sharing with you our research at a high level to show you just a little tip of the iceberg. And in the next few charts, I'll quickly show you some more examples of the data we have collected. These are specific to the ministries of the church respondents. The ministries include worship services, church planting, mission, and the funding of some of these ministries. Well, here's an example. What do you observe? What is the message presented here? Well, as you know, our Canadian Chinese churches are no longer only Chinese speaking. Many of our Canadian Chinese churches have English-speaking worship services, in addition to the Cantonese and Mandarin services. I would also point out their acknowledgement and embracing of the younger generations under their care. The youths and children have the unique and specific needs intellectually, emotionally, socially, and even culturally, in addition to the generation and language diversities. So the takeaway message is that there is no one-size-fits-all method to minister in our churches. We further slice and dice these church worship services into locales. For example, Calgary, and Edmonton at the bottom left. The metro area around the Golden Horseshoe, the Greater Vancouver area in the Lower Mainland, and Montreal and Ottawa Carleton. For example, visually, we can see that our churches have proportionally more English-speaking worship services, the orange column, in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, the Greater Vancouver area, and the Ottawa Carleton area. That was before COVID-19. And since March, we have pivoted and adapted our worship services from full on-site to online, and recently to partial on-site and hybrid online. Now here's a snapshot of some of the other ministries reported by the churches. Most of the churches, almost 4 in 5, have an overseas mission department. 3 in 4 have local outreach ministry. And more than a half have discipleship ministry. 1/3 have family ministry. And as we ride out the second wave of the pandemic, I would expect other ministry departments such as AV, IT, digital giving, media, to become more prevalent. And furthermore, some churches are planting churches. 77 of the 106 churches provided information about their church planting ministry. 13 of them reported that they had planted churches over the past 5 years, between 2014 and 2018. And 17 told us that they do plan to plant churches in the following 3 years. However, in light of the pandemic, I suspect that their plans may have been updated. There are different drivers for church planting. What are some of these variables? Well, to answer that question, we further sliced and diced the church planting data. We looked at where are the mother or the big sister churches. Many are in the GTHA. Intuitively, we would expect that the church planting churches are relatively large, and they've been established for some time. But here's an interesting observation. Check out the bottom right, the chart on the bottom right, which shows that the church planting churches already have multiple congregations. Now here's a slice of the church planting ministry diced by church budgets, such as general fund, building fund, and mission fund. Now, although one would assume that churches with large budgets are those who birth other churches, these charts suggest otherwise. As you can see, church planting is not just determined by financial capacity. I believe church planting is driven by need and opportunity. And speaking of budgets and financials, I'm reminded by what the Lord Jesus taught about the cost of being a disciple, recorded in the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 14, verses 28 to 30. Jesus said, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone will see it, will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Now, continuing with the financial motif, and based on my ministry experience, one of the KPIs, the key performance indicators, relates to budgets. And I had touched on this in an earlier chart. Let me peel back the onion skin and look a little deeper into some of the budget data and look at the dynamic between the financial components and the ministries, such as building and mission. Now, this table summarizes the various funds reported by the 106 churches. The general fund is at the top in green, the building and mission funds down the side. Now, here are some observations. Churches with lower general fund budgets in the green are saving up a building fund in orange. We could say that they are building up their building fund. Nevertheless, they also support missions and have healthy mission funds, colored in red. And know that the churches with larger general funds are also being a conduit through which God's blessings flow to the mission field. And for example, 6 of the churches in our study have a mission fund in excess of $250,000. And as you know, the Apostle Paul reminds the Colossians and us, and whatever you do, whether in word or in deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord and not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. So in wrapping up this segment about ministries, this chart presents what the church respondents told us about the percentage of their members who are involved in serving in the various ministries. For example, 10 churches told us that about 25% of their members are serving. 17 churches estimate 30% of their members are serving. Another 17 churches reported that a half of their members are involved in serving. And 20 churches estimate that at least 65% of their members are serving. Again, the pandemic may affect these statistics. And due to the time constraint of tonight's session, our intention is not for you to bite into and taste the data. Rather, we want to give you a whiff, to smell the data. We hope that this will whet your appetite and encourage you to read our report. And in our report, we have included many other tables and charts which present a distillation of the data. And for example, we collected data on locales, church denominations, ages of the churches, attendance, staffing, and budgets, and ministries such as worship services, church planting, outreach, and discipleship. More importantly, in the report, the research team described and analyzed the wealth of data that was collected. Therefore, I encourage everyone to obtain a copy of our report to take a closer look at the data and our analysis and to make your own conclusions. Now, I pass the baton back to Enoch to highlight some challenges and issues and conclude with some, so what? What then? And share some suggested actions for you to take away.
Thank you, Wes. Before I go further, I know it's somewhat daunting if you just want to look at the numbers. Looking at numbers itself would not give you any insight. The key here is to dig deeper into the numbers and to really think hard and say, how do I as a church leader and how do my church relate to the insights that the report is providing us? But before I go any further, I want to tell you that this whole report, this analysis and the whole project is not just simply work of our three amigos, as Wes would call us. There are a number of people who have been helping us along the way. And I said it right from the beginning, Reverend Tam has been a fantastic partner. He's provided us with a platform for us to complete the survey study. But apart from that, I want to give a shout out and thank you to the other team member, Dr. Vivian Chan, who has helped shape the questionnaire. I got a funny feeling that had it not been for the fact that she was going to give birth to a baby, she would be very active in helping us writing the report as well. Ruby Zito, the part of the CCCOWE staff, help us in mailing out all the survey. Brother David Lau is helpful in terms of getting the survey on the web and collecting the data. Brother Alex Cheung, I said earlier, helped translate the report. We wrote it in English, but he translated in Chinese. Sister Amanda Song, who is our print setter, she's in charge of the publication department of Canadian Chinese School of Theology. And I also want to give thanks to Brother Thomas Tsui, who's helped us, done a lot of what I call correlation analysis. And I'll give an example of what it means in terms of correlation analysis later on in one of the specific topic that I would be talking about. The entire survey data set has 32 questions. Has 31 questions. The last question is simply this: what is the role that you have in your church? And then before that, if we back from 28 to 30, there are 3 questions that are not necessarily quantitative data driven. In other words, they are not things that you kind of fill out the blanks and say, here's the numbers and so on. So you can appreciate that these 3 questions are designed to capture the kind of challenges that either the local church are facing or what they believe to be the entire Chinese Canadian churches are facing. So we asked 3 specific. Can you name 3? So 28 is about what are you facing right now? 29 is about what do you think the whole entire entity of Chinese churches in Canada are facing? And question number 30 is basically trying to do a catch-all. Are there anything that in this survey that we have not talked about that you want us to sort of poke further down the road? Anyway, so let's get into each and every one of them. For question number 28, now remember, everyone has an opportunity to identify 3 answers or 3 issues. There were, as I said, 106 responses coming back. And interestingly, though, out of the 126, 2 of them did not provide any responses to this particular question. So what I have done is that we basically group these responses, 104 times 3 each, so you can appreciate 104 times 3 each is we're talking about 312, right? So what we have done is we do a thematic analysis. In other words, out of these 314 items, what might be the themes that we can sort of classify them so that we can make sense of the concern. So here are the 10 specific themes. And I want to tell you that when I look at these themes, I'm not surprised by some of them. And yet there are also some new discovery. In other words, we basically, from the perspective of this study, we are able to say we confirm some of the things that we have been suspecting. That's not only the issues that our local churches are facing, but also churches across the country, the Chinese churches are facing as well. So next gen English speaking ministry, lay ministry about discipling and mobilization, aging of congregation, mainly about the Cantonese side, and aging of the pastor, mainly about sort of the founding pastor or the older pastor on the Cantonese side. And then of course, earlier, Pastor Tommy talked about the successions or the absence of the senior pastor or the retirement of it. And then it talks about the lack of resources in terms of facility or finance. The next 5 basically can be categorized into the theme of leadership, the changing demographic, the challenge of the cultural impact, evangelism and missional engagement and mission. And then there is also the intercongregational conflicts and issues. Last but not least is the conundrum of looking at lack of spiritual health of growth. Now, for the sake of discussion and for the sake of analysis, I did not spend time writing on every single one of them. I just spent time on the top 6. The reason why top 6 is you can imagine, looking from a percentage standpoint, even the number 6, the leadership one, it is hovering around 20% of the response. But again, number 1 is next gen, the English ministry. Now, I don't need to go any further. People who know me and Wes and Pastor Tam and Pastor Tommy, you know that we publish listening to their voices, and that is designed to specifically addressing that particular area. And then you have the lay ministry, the aging, and so on. So what I've done today is I want to single out the laity ministry in terms of discipling and mobilization to give you a glimpse of what these people are talking about. And there are 2 areas that kind of stand out. Discipleship. ranging from lack of strategy to train and shape disciple, to having an absence of providing a good daily practices of following Christ. So the church leader or those who respond to the survey are dreading about the lack of discipleship, and I call it discipleship shaping, not making. I don't like the term making because it sounds like a factory product. It's making. It's not making, it's shaping. So discipleship, and then not only that, they're dragging the fact that there is not enough laity picking up the ministry. And this is where we can totally acknowledge the adage. What is the adage? And that is what we call the Peter's rule, right? And that is that 20% of the congregants are doing 80% of the work. And that is so true as far as this study is concerned. Let me give you some of the actual reply in terms of the verbiage so that you can understand what I'm talking about. 参与侍奉人小 lack of participation in ministry 不足够的侍奉人员 inadequate people to serve. There's lack of emphasis on discipleship. And I want to tell you that the phrase discipleship and its associate showed up in 13 responses out of the 30 that we identified as the kind of this particular category. When we turn our attention to the next question, which is question number 29, and that is to ask the respondents to identify 3 major challenges that they perceive, not only themselves, but they perceive the entire Chinese churches are facing in Canada. There are 106 again in terms of the total responses, and yet 5 of them did not say anything about this. And you can see from this particular chart, there are a lot of overlapping concerns. So those are in yellow color, show up not only here, but they also showed up previously in the answer to the previous question. The only difference in the top 6 is if you go back to the earlier page, is the cultural, I call it cultural or societal engagement. And this is where we see people talking about the concern about the onslaught of secularization. There is lack of cultural dialogue. And there's the challenge of talking about the relevancy of our faith and our church. So let me take a look at some of the percentage that you can sort of glean at. Again, next gen, not only the local church, they perceive it to be like bar none, the #1 concern across the country, 57 and 53%. And again, we're not going to adjust it here. The report adjusts it, and also listening to their voices, report also adjusts it. And you can see that the percentage for the others. And I want to talk a little bit more about the cultural or societal engagement. Before I do that, however, there's one interesting observation. Leadership happens to show up on top 6 on both questions. Not only that, leadership happens to show up as number 6. Very specifically, lack of vision, lack of strategy, there's no leadership development. Now you can make the argument, all the issues that we talk about here today can be described and categorized as leadership issues. But in order to give you the nuance of the issues, we decided to split it out into this type of setting. So let's get into the cultural and societal engagement. And there are 3 issues that the respondent talked about. The first one, they highlighted the cultural exclusionary nature of the Chinese churches in Canada. So they use terms such as there is a very high degree of isolation that is happening in the immigrant church. There is an ethnocentric approach in terms of church ministry and outreach. And there's a huge cultural gap trapped in sustaining the pride and the legacy of the church, meaning the older generation does not want to give in to the younger generation when it comes to opening up the church ministry. The second issue has something to do with the impact of the secularization that is now permeating in our social agenda. And it's also impacting the church as a whole. So comments such as, we are concerned about the secularization of social culture and identity. How do we resist secularization? 怎么去这个抵制这个世俗化? Not only that, our believers are being secularized as well. How do we deal with it? We are very concerned. Many of them simply pointing to a single phrase, secularism, cultural impact, and also observing that mainstream Canadian society is not upholding Christian faith that they used to. But of course, this is a really big topic and we don't have time to talk about. I mean, Quebec was leading this charge way back in the 60s, separating the state and the church, and now is another leading the charge of completely secularizing the public behavior, totally prohibiting religious symbol or religious clothing, at least with public servant. And then the last comment that I showed up here, talking about churches being marginalized. And then finally, some of the respondents are looking at cultural and societal engagement as an opportunity to establish or re-establish more what I call bridging capital, meaning making connection with wider society, to establish connection between church and the broader society in such a way that we would make our faith known. So rather than letting them attacking us, let us turn the table around. So how do we establish multi-ethnic church? How do we deal with multiculturalism? How do we deal with social responsibilities and cross-cultural mission and shift of cultural dynamics? Again, I don't have time to tackle all this, and I don't want to sort of do a advertisement. I have done 2 significant faith journey, research on faith journey of the local born. My PhD dissertation is my first one. It talks tremendously about how we deal with multi-ethnic church, how we deal with multiculturalism in Canada. So question 29 is about a sort of like a broad stroke type of a challenges. And then the last question, well, second last, question 30, we asked the respondents to identify if there are anything that has not been captured in the survey, and yet they want to tell us. Interestingly, 76 out of the 106 basically has no input. But for the remaining 30 entries, I cannot give you an aggregate responses to form any theme. So they are kind of trips in here and so on and so forth. Let me read you one of them for you, then you can get a sense of what I'm talking about, right? So we're talking about, just give me a minute. My bad, I changed the slide a little bit. So let me just give you a sense of what they're talking about. So they make comments such as, just pray for us, right? 为我们祷告. And then another one basically said that we are a remote church plant that has not been able to become independent. After 10 years, the main challenge is that we lack mature Christians willing to carry out the gospel ministry, and placing a suitable seasoned pastor is also very difficult due to our locale, right? And then we have people like ministry to the marginalized population should be an area we need to explore. For example, how do we deal with mentally challenged people with addictions and of various forms, homeless people, and so on and so forth. And then one individual has a very strong bent, very strong bias on discussing theology. So he said, what we should be talking more about is 教会的治理的模式，神学的立场跟教会观。He wants us to talk more about church governance, theological concept, and the whole church view. So this is the kind of the thing that we are talking about in terms of responses to the second last questions. Nothing to write home about. It's drips and drabs. I call it a garden variety. of the issues. So if we can quickly bring our sort of presentation to a close, what we have done here with this particular survey is that it provides a very good glimpse into the landscape of what a Chinese immigrant church looked like. Earlier, when you listen to Dr. Wes Wong, I don't know whether you get the drift. We, the Chinese church, are very strong in supporting mission. And the support for mission had nothing to do whether you have money or not. In fact, when I look at my data and do correspondent analysis, I can tell you supporting mission is everywhere, no matter you got small budget, large budget. In other words, mission support is something that we pride ourselves being the core of our ministry. Not only that, tonight we have been able to confirm some of our hunches. English ministry, we've been talking about it. I mean, don't need to tell you that. Listening to their voices has already confirmed that. And also this particular survey points to the same direction. But what has surprised me though, is the idea of cultural engagement. I never thought about the church would look at cultural and societal engagement as such a high concern on their mind. It is indeed a very important subject for the Chinese church to go forward and to wrestle with. And yet, here we are. It is being surfaced as one of the key issues that these respondents look at from the perspective of the entire Chinese church as an entity that we are facing. And not only that, this particular research, what we would be able to hope to be able to do is to form a baseline now, meaning that what we want to be able to do, God's grace and mercy, in the next 3 to 5 years, the Canadian Chinese School of Theology and CCCOWE Canada will partner again to do another one of these. And the idea is to be able to allow us to conduct what we call compare and contrast analysis to see where we are 5 years from now. Not only that, to also look at the issues that we said we are facing today. 5 years later, are we facing the same issue? Are we still dragging how we deal with the second gen? Are we still struggling in terms of raising the younger generation in terms of pastor? Are we still facing the challenge of succession and retirement of older pastors? Not only that, are we being able to service newer issues? So that's something that we want to do down the road. Here are some suggested actions. When you get the report, I know you cannot go to Tim Horton these days, but make a coffee, set aside 2-3 hours, read it through. Circle those that you believe that resonate with your own current situation, with you as a pastor, with you as a leader, with you as a lay person in the church, but also with you as a church. How do we deal with these issues? And not only that, digest it and also discuss it with your leadership team and to assess where you are compared with what the report are talking about, right? The report may be pointing about certain things that you believe to be not your issues at all. You may say to yourself and to your coworker, been there, done that, get the t-shirt or get the cup, right? And also find ways to collaborate with other churches or churches within your own denomination to find common grounds and solutions. If we are facing all this stuff, how can we as a denomination tackle all that? More importantly, find a way to convene ministry conference for specific topics. Reverend Tam and I have been talking about, if the pandemic is going to get better, no, sorry, I shouldn't say pandemic getting better. If we are getting better in fighting the pandemic next year, that may allow us to travel across Canada, we would be able to organize those, what I call ministry conference, bringing some of the salient issues whereby we can talk specifically, not only about the issue, but provide some solution or suggested actions addressing things such as succession, things such as mobilization, things such as discipleshiping, etc., etc., etc. Now, before we completely end this, I want to let you know that if you're interested in getting a copy of this particular presentation in PDF, it's PowerPoint, but if you want to get it in PDF, we would be able to provide that to you, but just email me, Enoch Wong at ccst.ca. When you send me the email, identify who you are, your church, and your role at your church, and we will send you a copy of this particular PDF, and so that you can at least get a glimpse. Not only that, it is our desire to have the full report made available in the next 2 weeks. I know Wes is going to tell me, he's whispering in my ear right now, do not overpromise, and yet you underdeliver. Always underpromise, overdeliver. I hope 2 weeks would be able to get the report out. And I know that CCCOWE has gotten all of your email address, and we would notify you through email that the link to download the report would be available. Finally, I want to acknowledge that had it not been the Lord who built the house, the builders would be building the house in vain. Had it not been the Lord who watches over the cities, the watchmen stand watch in vain. So we want to give glory to the Lord for his guidance, his strength, and his mobilization across the Chinese churches in Canada. Not only those who responded to this particular specific research, but also to those who are laboring in their vineyard for the sake of God's kingdom and for the sake of God's glory. Now, are there any questions and answers at this point in time that we can handle?
好，我哋就多謝我哋呢個東方三博士啊，俾我哋一個咁好嘅一個研究。我哋而家咧有少少時間嘅，咁我哋就覺得咧都需要大家要分享下、討論一下。我哋知道咧好多嘅材料、好多嘅資料啊，a wealth of information。但係我哋而家咧覺得都係時間，大家可以嚟到交流一下。咁或者好簡單嘅睇完、聽完之後，有乜嘢問題，大家即係 pop up 你個 mind 裏面出現咗嘅，咁即刻咪打2個字俾我哋啦，我哋就可以開始嚟到討論一下。或者剛才我哋就嗰個提到嘅問題咧，我先打開一個討論嘅話盒子啦。咁即係話，剛才我哋就討論過咧，喺整個嘅環境裏面咧，我哋就見到唔同嘅挑戰啊。我哋都係往前望噶嘛，但呢啲嘅挑戰出現嘅時候咧，就俾我哋好大嘅困難。第一個大挑戰就係我哋嘅下一代我哋嘅 next generation。咁或者幾位嘅researcher 啦大家一齊脫呢個團隊，或者同你個人嚟講，仲有咩可以再提供俾我哋咧？Dr. Enoch 咧都有一齊參與咗呢個聆聽下一代嘅心聲。但係到目前為止，又有咩可以同大家講下嘅咧？又點樣去 tackle 呢個挑戰嘅問題？下一代嘅呢個事工嘅挑戰。
My sense of the next gen issue is a fundamental issue of our willingness to face it. Now, when I said this, I don't mean that pastors don't want to face it, but they don't really place it as a key core issues or priority that they need to tackle in the church. Part of the reason is that they do what they do best, meaning that I do me and you do you. So I know how to preach gospel to my own generation, and I'm good in preaching and so on and so forth. But to really engage in the next gen ministry takes time, effort, and a high degree of humility. That you really need to kind of practice what Paul talks about, the example of Jesus Christ in Philippians chapter 2, how one must lower ourselves. And sometimes it is not about instruction. Sometimes it is just about lowering ourselves and walking with them. And in our report, we talk about the importance of journeying with them. We call it mentoring, but really as the alongside ship, the practice of walking alongside them. I don't see a whole lot of that. I don't see a whole lot of that.
所以咧，其實咧就我哋即係加拿大華福咧，其實今年咧亦都launch 咗一個 project 咧，就叫做 Better Together。意思即係話咧要跨代同行啊。咁啊，剛才Dr. Enoch 都話到，你睇唔到點樣大家一齊做啲嘢咁樣。如果我哋真係要實踐到下一代嘅事工咧，能夠有啲根基啊，或者有啲方向感咧，而家就真係要做一啲叫做跨代同行嘅嘢。我哋要揾到兩代之間咧，即係講三代都好啦嚇。咁啊，或者我哋喺嗰兩代之間見到嗰個有啲 common point 嘅嗰啲嘅叫做共同點啊。揾到啲共同點嘅時候咧，然後我哋喺嗰度嚟到入手咧，就好過大家都講我哋係唔同噶啦。你講英文，我講中文，你係中西文化咁樣啊，即係你講嗰啲都冇乜意義嘅。而家已經係個事實，不如我哋就尋找呢個共通點，或者我哋喺性格喺文化上面，其實仲有好多地方可以夾埋一齊嘅。唔係一定話年紀大同年紀輕嘅唔可以走埋一齊做嘢侍奉，尤其是喺教會添。所以我哋即係求主俾我哋更多恩典咧，睇到更多呢一方面啦。Dr. Wes 同埋 Dr. Tommy， 你哋有冇咩想加落嚟咧？講下下一代嘅呢啲嘅事情嘅話。
我想，一个很重要的是两边，我说两边呢，就是第一代、第二代，或者中文跟英文，这个看你怎么去分了。两边都真的需要一种谦虚，一种谦卑，一起的去看，因为这个世界变得太快啊。我自己看自己为1.5代吧，这个会讲英文，会看这里的这些的文化，但是说实在，有时候也会觉得会有点害怕。我想如果我的英文再差一点的话，那一种的害怕，那一种的感觉是更加强烈。然后因为害怕，因为惧怕，然后就会不同人有不同的这个反应，有一些就会为自己保护起来了，然后就不跟这个社会有交流，然后跟下一代就会比较少，然后下一代看到你这个样子，然后就那个隔阂就越来越严重。然后下一代又会有时候又看不起第一代的这个情况，因为你都不知道，你都跟这个世界都已经脱轨了这个。所以这个如果两边都能够谦卑下来，第一代就承认自己不懂，第二代也不要看不起，其实两边都有需要去成长的地方。我自己曾经做过英文传道，现在是国语教会的主任牧师。这个真的看到我两边都站过，也会发现真的其实都很难，真的是很难，不能够说一边完全都责任都在完全一边，不是这个样子。然后每个人都有自己的限制。然后刚才在那个 chat 里面我也看到有一点我觉得很同意的，就是这个mentoring 这个哪怕是1对1或者1对2这一种的mentoring， 这个在现在的年轻人当中，这个是他们很需要，他们甚至有一些也很渴望需要得到的这样的一种的引导吧。然后正这一个呢，我的观察是第一代很多时候是比较弱的，这个是比较就是我们传统很难 generalize 啊，但是我所经历过的教会，无论是在香港、在新加坡或者在这里的话，我都会认为会发现这个牧养呢，很多时候就是 听讲道、查经然后就是门训了但是这个1对1少数一点的这种的师父带徒弟这一种的关系呢，不是没有，我也感恩我自己在新加坡也有这样的一种的带领所以就能够留下来在教会了得到之后但是很多得不到，然后又很渴望，然后找不到就离开教会了，所以这个我觉得是第一代、第二代都要正面去面对这个。
Yeah, I want to just address more the difference between first generation and second generation or third generation or anything post first generation. It's actually not just a language issue. A lot of us think, oh, we're in Canada or North America. Well, the second generation, they're English speaking. The first generation, they're Chinese speaking. So we're focused too much on the language. And guess what? Everybody on the call here, most of us speak multiple languages, and regardless of age. So we have to be aware that there's more to language and generation at issue. And in particular, as Enoch pointed out, and one of the challenges, issues that we identify is the societal and the cultural. So I believe the cultural aspect is important to take into consideration, because typically the second generation has a Western culture, whereas the first generation, the immigrant, has an Eastern culture, and the two, never the twain shall meet, unless, as Pastor Tommy reminded us, what Jesus told us and what Paul told us that Jesus is exemplified in Philippians 2 is to be humble. So if everybody's humble, it's fine, but we also have to know and be aware of the cultural nuances, the diversity. Even like if some of you have children who are born in Canada or North America, and you were not born in North America, even though in the same family, you may, even though you have a common language, you have a different mindset. And to the point where Tommy referred to, I think, Michael's comment about the one-on-one. You see, the Western culture, like people here in the West, especially in we the North, basically we're individualistic. So we like one-to-one. We like to think about ourselves. The Far East of the Asians are more collectivist, more of an Eastern culture. They like to have a group. They like to be together. So you got to understand the two different mindsets. And then depending on who you mentor, you either mentor one-on-one or a group effort. And think about Jesus. He spent time alone. He spent time one-on-one. He spent time 1-on-3. He spent time 1-on-12, or even the 72, or even 1,000. So we have to be adaptable, but important, as Tommy reminded us, to be humble. Okay. So think about the culture when we try to minister to the diversity of our generations.
If you talk about culture, what about secularism? I think that is one of the main issues, at least we touch on. Can you further elaborate?
Yeah, this is a very good point. Actually, someone, I think Bernard is asking the same question. Bernard, I know you're asking, how secularization is defined. This is not an easy sort of question to answer per se. How do we define it? Let me just give you some idea. How do we see this? Number one, it is the idea especially in Canadian setting, that we are facing not only secularization, we're also facing what we call the multicultural milieu. When Pierre Trudeau came up with multiculturalism as an idea and also as a law back in 1980, when he enshrined that in the legislature, his idea is interculturalism, not just simply multiculturalism. But now we are not doing interculturalism. Everybody doing its own thing. So in the whole society, the idea of I'm going to do my own thing. So secularization and multiculturalism basically force us to keep our faith to ourselves, right? In other words, the idea of openly talking about Christian faith in the public domain that could be perceived as us imposing that value on someone else is a no-no. So, someone, I believe Joel Thiessen did a study, is that 87% of Canadians believe that faith should be something that you hold to yourself and you discuss it in your home, not out there. So that's part of what I call the onslaught of the secularism. I'm not getting into the detail of it, but values is another one. Values in terms of relativism. In other words, you hold your own idea, I hold my own, and it's okay. And I'm not going to get into the fight with you. So for us, when the marginalized, whom we're supposed to love, talked about different sexual orientation, I don't know, someone make this comment to me, those who actually totally accept homosexuality may not be a majority of the society if you do a survey. But nonetheless, they have a very big voice and we need to accept that. But because of that, people now misunderstood and very much confused with when we talk about certain value that is not theirs, they turn it around. So when we talk about Christian faith and they said we're imposing on them, but when we begin to sort of disagree with them, they said that we are sort of attacking their own value. So we need to be very careful in how we articulate ourselves here, especially in Canada, which is so different from in the state where faith can be talked about in a public arena. I think that's really important. How do we shape our own faith expression in such a way that we can express our faith, Jesus' love, and also how do we at the same time hold people accountable in terms of their behavior? We may not want to call it sinful behavior, but nonetheless, there's an accountability we need to uphold. I think that's really important. I also want to take this opportunity to answer a couple of more questions that people identified in the Q&A section. And one of the questions is basically said, what do you think about the real reason why churches do not respond to the survey? I can only tell you that I don't know. I can guess. One of the possibility is that people don't like survey. They don't like talking about themselves. So they don't want to participate. And not only that, they don't know what you may use it for. They're sort of concerned.
Or they don't believe in.
Or they don't believe, or some of them basically say, you know what, I don't want to talk about my weakness, right? I don't want to show my weakness. I don't want to be that open. So that's maybe one of the other one is that there was really no what we call survey culture in the Chinese church. Yeah. And hopefully we will start with this a little bit. And then the other one is talking about, this particular survey, we see 106, I'm trying to translate because it's written in Chinese, of what percentage of 106 of the entire Chinese churches in Canada? I can tell you that we sent 394 churches, but it doesn't mean there are actually 390 churches in Canada. It's just, we simply don't know, right? I've heard other people talk about we have 500 Chinese churches in Canada or 600. I'm not challenging them. The only thing I can respond to them is there's no basis for that. And I'm not suggesting you shouldn't think about it. You can think all day long. I would defend your freedom to think so. But from a research standpoint, there is still no understanding collectively how many Chinese churches we have in Canada until they want to participate in survey. It's really important to do that. Another question, is it okay? Is it important? This intergenerational stuff can be solved by enforcing or by implementing, family altar, meaning family devotion. I would say so. In the LTTV we talked about parents not being a very strong influence in the faith transmission. Is because they were not able to do effective family devotion. But I want to tell you, thinking about it is one thing, doing it is totally different. The problem, in my humble opinion, about parents' influence on the younger generation is not about what we do in terms of those devotional practice. It's how we parents must live out the faith ourselves. If you understand the English adage, it takes a man to make a man. It takes a man to make a man. And obviously, immediately, you can think about what Jesus said, right? Discipleship shaping. It takes a disciple to shape a disciple. And if you want to raise the next generation to be disciple, you better be a disciple. You better be a disciple. So I think that's really important to understand that. Now, sorry, I keep talking about all this stuff because I really want to get to sort of the culture. And one of the things I want to respond to what Wes talking about. One of the things the seminary should do is to really put a good emphasis on cross-cultural leadership. I don't mean cross-cultural leadership as related to cross-cultural mission, because by all account, in terms of my understanding of definition of culture and my own teaching of leadership, the Chinese church in Canada is a venue and a context for cross-cultural ministry. It's not just simply about language. I can even make this argument, and I'm saying this with my good friend Tommy Choi. And I say this because I think he can take it. His Mandarin is absolutely perfect. But some may say yours is only Singaporean Mandarin. You're not even mainland Chinese or Taiwanese. You don't understand us. Yeah, so somewhat jokingly, but you know what I'm saying. So right now in my own seminary, I'm trying to organize a course on cross-cultural leadership to allow our students to really come to understand who they are and the kind of people that they need to work with. Not so much about overcoming the barrier right away, but having that understanding, the awareness, and some tools to tackle them would be a good step to go forward.
That's wonderful. And may I just want to add one more thing about family altar. It would work when the kids are young, but when they're grown up, you better go on a short-term mission trip with them. So open up your wallet to do that.
Not just go into short-term mission trip, but support them when they turn short-term mission to mid-term mission. And
Yes.
support them when they turn from mid-term mission to long-term mission.
And they will come and ask for your help.
Well, actually, so Enoch, I want to use your disciple shaping paradigm to start disciple shaping your kids when they're young.
Absolutely.
Then they would take you to mission trip.
That's right. Now, there's not a whole lot of question here. Can I just maybe ask Wes to bring up the rest of the PowerPoint a little bit?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
One of the things that the Center for Leadership is doing.
Sorry, Enoch.
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Hey, can I interject? I just want to respond to the family altar question a little
Sure, of course.
bit. Yeah, sorry. I agree with all what you guys have said. You know, when the kids are young, it's easy to do. When they're older, it's getting difficult. My son is turning going to turn 12 very soon, and I'm already having difficulty trying to get him to do you know, family devotion. It is reality. It's very difficult, and it actually this is what I'm experimenting, and this is how I am pastoring my own church too, right? I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and I was educated in Singapore, right? And I know, no matter how hard I try, now that I am the senior pastor of a Mandarin-speaking church, right? No matter how hard I try, I will never become a person who is, you know, mother tongue is Mandarin and who grew up in mainland China. And no, I will never become that. No, even if I speak perfect Mandarin, even if I speak perfect English, no, it's not going to happen. So what I am doing, and I think it has been working quite well, is that I adopt a missionary mindset. So I see myself, and I actually let my people know that, hey, I'm from Hong Kong. Sometimes I don't understand you guys, and you don't understand me, which is fine, right? We don't have to completely understand each other or completely identify with each other before we can work together and move forward. We don't have to do that, right? But so now they know that, and I know that I have my limitation and I work within that mindset. So I think this is what, if I'm not wrong, this is what Enoch was trying to get across. Right? And I also apply this to how I raise my kids and how I, try to guide my kids and other young people in the church. Right? I adopt a missionary mindset that, hey, I know that I'll never be a second generation. I know that I'll never be, a native English speaker, or all these cultural nuances. I'll never get it, and I accept it, and then I work within that posture and let the people whom I'm pastoring know that. And then, if they see my humility, if they see that, there are also things that they don't understand about me and about my background, which is fine. And then we work together. And if we have all these same postures, I think it will work. So far, I think it's been working quite well for me. At least I haven't heard any major complaint, right? And I've never heard anything that, hey, he's from Hong Kong and he doesn't understand us. It's, it's never like that, at least not in front of my face, right? I would say, hey, it's okay. Tommy doesn't know. And yeah, and let's work together still, right? And I think it has been working well. When I was an English pastor, I help them and I work with them, and they know that I was not born here. And so for family altar, I think we have to know that there is a certain point that we cannot keep imposing what we know onto our younger generation, switch our posture to a way that is like, hey, I don't know, tell me more about it, right? And how do you think Jesus would do? Something like that. Explore it together, rather than always keep telling them, hey, what I want you to do. And then if we keep doing that, before long they will just lose. We will just lose them. Yeah.
All right, so
Sorry, Enoch.
no problem, no problem. Let me just let's wrap this up a little bit before I hand back the time to Reverend Tam. Many of you know that the research that we've been doing over the last few years. Don't worry about who is behind it, so long as you know this is being done for the sake of the Chinese church, and that is really to understand, who we are and what we do, and for that we have done, you've done the listening to their voices in the past, and we have now completed the general survey. Will be made available soon. But one of the research project we are rolling out right now, specifically targeting the pastors at the Chinese church, and that is called the Voices of Pastor. The idea of the Voices of Pastor is to explore, the next slide, please, to explore the well-being and the leadership ministries of pastor at the Chinese immigrant churches in Canada. Now, yes, this one is not in partnership with CCCOWE in terms of the undertaking, but I want to let you know that CCCOWE is a sponsor for this project that is being led by the Center for Leadership Studies, uh, uh, sort of related to my ministry. And it's being rolled out across the country right now. It is being supported by all of the major denominations, the Baptist, the CNMA, the Missionary Alliance, the Mennonite Brethren, the Evangelical Free Church, Associate Gospel Churches, and so on and so forth. So I just want to ask the pastors that are attending this particular presentation, send me your email as well, that I can send you the link to go participate in this particular study. Because again, without your participation, we won't be able to understand where you are at. 这个是我们现在推动的一个也是比较大的一个研究的计划。牧者的新生，目的是探索加拿大华人教会的牧者，他们的身心灵的整体的健康跟领导的事工， 有很多的宗派在背后，不但是用钱，也用推动的那个者式来帮我们提供给他们的牧者去参与这一个研究的问卷的计划。希望你们当中做牧者做传道的，也给我一个电邮，以便我给你参加这一个计划的一个连线。我们参加这个调查，我们有3个不同的语言，有英语的，有繁体中文的，也有一个简体中文的，也方便你去选择，去挑哪一个你觉得是方便的这个言语来参加这一个非常重要的一个研究的计划。好的，谢谢 ，Thank you。
好多謝Dr. Enoch 啦，同埋 Dr. Wes、Dr. Tommy， 咁佢哋3個俾咗我哋一個好全面嘅一個嘅研究。咁我好相信咧，呢個研究作為華福加拿大眾華人教會一個嘅基礎，一個嘅景觀。我哋盼望咧，主若許可咧，再過幾年時間咧，又會再做一個咁樣嘅研究。咁大家可以有一個叫做 longitudinal studies 啊，可以長遠啲嚟睇下加國華人教會嘅發展會係點樣。咁有啲嘅好重要嘅一啲嘅 issue 啦，或者啲議題咧，我哋都盼望能夠眾教會喺呢一方面多啲努力啦，一齊嚟到同心嚟到去耕耘神俾我哋嘅加國華人教會，我哋點樣嚟到參與，點樣嚟到帶領服侍。咁我哋希望咧呢個 survey 咧能夠係大家喺呢一次咧可以嚟到係同Dr. Enoch 啦，直接去索取佢俾出嚟嘅嗰個 PDF。of 呢個 PowerPoint 嘅 PDF， 但係我哋成個研究嘅報告咧，我哋相信1個禮拜、2個禮拜到啦，或者啦，又會喺網上咧嚟到去大家可以 download 㗎。咁呢個喺華福嘅網站 CCCOWE.ca， 咁大家留意一下。咁我哋希望能夠盡快攞出嚟之後咧，大家可以喺網上 download 到，歡迎你哋奉獻喎，因為華福都需要呢啲嘅奉獻經費咧嚟到繼續做呢啲咁有意義嘅研究嘅工作。咁好多人以前唔中意研究或者唔中意抌錢抌時間做研究，但係其實今日我哋都知道，教會嘅研究同其他嘅公司嘅 R&D 咧一樣咁重要嘅啫。我哋唔做咧，就唔知道下一步點樣行㗎。所以求神幫助我哋眾教會同心做好呢個咁有意義嘅加國華人教會研究嘅工作。咁我哋就今日嘅時間到呢度為止㗎啦。咁我哋盼望主咧繼續幫助大家嘅教會嘅服侍啦，整體身心靈嘅健康。咁最後咧，我想請我哋加拿大華福喺我哋渥太華加東北區嘅董事咧陳建安牧師咧，幫你做一個結束嘅祈禱。我哋將時間就交俾陳建安牧師。
好，我哋大家一齊嚟到祈禱，為到今天晚上呢個報告嚟到去感謝神。天父上帝，我哋感謝你嘅恩典，你俾我哋今天晚上能夠聽到一個咁好嘅研究嘅報告，俾華福又俾加拿大華人神學院一個團隊組成3位嘅同工嚟到一齊做呢個重要嘅研究工作。主要我哋現在有呢啲數據擺在我哋嘅面前，亦都係有一啲嘅分析在背後。主要我哋都係獻上感謝。當我哋睇到呢啲嘅調查嘅結果嘅時候，我哋睇到主你自己嘅手係一度在加拿大華人教會裏工作。雖然呢度只係100多間嘅教會，但係亦都係代表咗好多弟兄姊妹同工教牧在當中嗰個擺上嘅辛勞，聖靈嘅帶領，弟兄姊妹嗰個服侍，睇到呢個華人教會嚟到慢慢成長，係你自己嘅恩典，你自己嘅拖帶。當我哋睇到呢啲嘅數據嘅時候，我哋都係獻上感謝，知道神你在加拿大華人當中嚟到去動工，為要達成你自己嘅心意。主要我哋求你嚟到繼續使用。當我哋睇到呢啲數據嘅時候，讓每間教會都能夠睇到自己嗰個嘅定位，讓我哋知道係我哋有啲欠缺嘅地方，亦都有啲係要追上嘅地方，亦都係有啲感恩嘅地方。讓我哋都係能夠彼此學習、彼此鼓勵，在呢個嘅教會嘅事上、神國嘅事工上邊，能夠更進一步。主要求你都係恩待，好叫我哋能夠好好使用呢啲數據嚟到去繼 繼續嚟到係為主嚟到工作。主要我哋知道在當中都係有唔完全嘅地方，亦都有欠缺嘅地方。但係主要我哋知道係你係掌管一切，呢個教會嘅頭。主耶穌基督，你係治理教會嘅大牧者。我哋知道一切都係在你嘅手上，你都係使用唔同嘅弟兄唔同嘅同工，我哋喺教會上嚟到去繼續見證你。主要我哋就求你嚟到去使用呢個嘅survey嘅報告，好叫我哋能夠在當中能夠有長進，能夠係更加侍奉，能夠更加榮耀主你自己。亦都為到係呢3位同工，佢哋繼續要做好多嘅侍奉或者有下一步嘅研究，我哋亦都加俾你，你哋跟住你繼續嚟到大大使用，好叫佢能夠真正幫助我哋喺加拿大華人教會各方面嘅事工。感謝你俾我哋今天晚上呢一個嘅報告，感謝你俾我哋嘅分享，在當中睇到弟兄姊妹嗰個嘅支持，睇到你自己嘅工作點樣去成長，我哋都獻上感謝。散去嘅時候，求主你繼續保守帶領，我哋咁樣禱告，奉耶穌基督嘅名，阿門。
Amen。
阿門，阿門。